shot. Okay, so please follow along, because this is going to get a little tricky, but if you follow what I'm doing, I'm going to give you a fail-safe way of doing it, and it works every single time if you're careful. You pay this tax, right? You pay this to the Manitoba Land Titles Office. Watch this. It's a, what does it say? A one-time cost. Highlight that as well. You only pay it once when you buy your property. This is on page 61. Land transfer taxes paid when the owner of the property changes. Home buyers need to be aware of this cost. It's a one-time large cost. You don't need to pay this when you rent, correct? You don't need to pay this, but when you're buying, you do. The first 200,000 of the value is taxed according to a scale. And then any amount over 200,000 is flat 2%. It's flat 2%. So this is the scale. I'm going to write this down. This is the scale that the city uses. And I'm going to zoom into that a little bit, because I need you to understand this. Come on. Work with me. Work with me. There you go. Good job. So guess what? On the first $30,000 of any property, you would pay 0%. So if you manage to buy a house that's less than 30,000, good luck with that. You would not pay any land transfer tax. So that's just zero. Just put zero down. As a decimal, that's a 0. On the next 60,000, so right, so first 30 nothing. On the next 60, which would get us to 90,000, you pay 0.5%. If you divide that by 100, what do you get? I'm dividing that by 100. That's 0.005. That's very important to get that. I would have this on my study sheet, to be honest. And then on the next 60,000, so you go from 90 to 150, right? Which would be the next 60,000. You pay 1%, which is 0.01. So I want you to use the decimal. Okay, then the next one, the next 50,000, which takes you from 150 to 200, you pay 1.5%. We divide that by 100, that's 0.015. Okay. And then on amounts in excess or above 200,000, it's 2%, which you already know it's going to be 0.02. Okay. So these numbers are the ones I'm going to use heavily. Okay. So I want to make another note here. Usually the province includes this chart, but if you don't get these numbers right, the decimals, you will get the wrong answer. Can you just write down here, land transfer tax is based on the purchase price. Exclamation mark. So in other words, i.e., don't subtract down payment. The city doesn't, or the province, I should say, they don't care how much of a down payment you have when it comes to taxation. They want to tax you on the full amount of the house. So when the market went crazy, the housing market now kind of cooled off. The more your property is worth, the more taxes they collected. So they probably loved it. They wouldn't admit it publicly, but they were raking in cash. They were doing the same amount of work. Like the clerk was probably going stamp, stamp, click, 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 right? And more money they were collecting. And they actually love it. If you were to move every year, they would love that even more because every time you buy another house, you pay land transfer tax. If you stay in your house forever, you only pay it once and that's it, right? So they actually like exchanges. I should be careful because they pay me, right? Hopefully they'll never see this video. But that's something that you need to remember. So I developed this chart here to help you understand. So the first 30K, 0%, then it's 0.5%, 60, 50, and then anything above 200,000 is just flat 2%. And these are the highlighters I'm going to use. I'm going to use orange for the first one. I'm going to use green for the second one. You don't have to do this, but I would say it will stand out. Like I'm looking, look at my original here. It stands out later on. Like where did those numbers come from, right? So that's why I do. I believe in highlighting because it's not as dull when you review it. And then the 50K, I go with my regular yellow color. Okay, so there are my, oh, my booklet is falling off the edge here. Okay, so let's do a question here. Calculate the land transfer tax. So this should be key here. Land transfer tax for a house, for purchasing a house worth 385,000. Okay, so we're going to do that as follows. So watch how I do this. I start with that amount. I start way at the top because you may run out of room if you don't. So I go like this. 385,000 minus, I go through this chart. What's the first amount here? 30K. So I take away 30,000 from it. Put a line down. And then what are you left with? 385,000 minus 30, 355. Yeah. Can you still keep going? Can you keep subtracting 60,000 from this number? And the answer is yes, right? 60,000. So I'm going to go minus 60,000. And I should highlight because I promised I would, right? So the first one, I'm going to do orange. Then the next amount, I'm going to do 60,000. I'm going to use my calculator here because minus 60,000, you're at 295. So write that down, 295. Minus, I'm going to stop there for a bit because I just remembered it's probably better to do this right away. This would be times 0%. This would be times, what's 0.5% as a decimal? Yes, 0.005. But we're not going to calculate this right away. I'm just going to put the percentages that go with that bracket. Let's keep going. We have more to go, right? There's the pink 60,000. We can still subtract, so we keep subtracting until we can't. So that's my 60,000 there, pink. So I go minus 60,000. That's 235. I'm left with. What's my next bracket? It's the 50,000, right? Can I subtract 50,000 from what's here still? Absolutely. $185, yeah. And the 50,000 needs to be highlighted. There. So I went through all, there are 4 brackets, right? I used them all because I was able to. So there's nothing else to subtract. All right, guys, you went through you went through everything. So this amount, I want to make sure you get this right. The pink part, like this bracket here, the pink bracket got 1%, so I'm going to multiply that by 0.01. The yellow bracket, right, if you look up here, is 1.5%. That is 0.015. And what do you do with the remaining amount? So this is the 185,000 is like over 200,000. That gets taxed 2%. So you just take that and you multiply it by 2%, like that. What's 30,000 times 0%? 0. Okay. And then 60,000, you take the 60,000 here, multiply it by 0.005. Some of these numbers you'll remember, you'll start memorizing them. That's 300. So you would pay 300 here. What's 60,000 times 1%? Any volunteers, mental math? 600. We take the 50,000 times 0.015. That's 750. And then 185,000 times 0.02. Look at that. You might think you were thinking, oh, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. 300, 600, 700, 3,700. So how much do you think you're going to have to pay? The answer is add all these up, and that's your final answer. So land transfer tax would be 300 plus 600 plus 750 plus 3,700. And that gives you a whopping, this is exactly how much you would pay. This is not even, it's not like, this is pretty close. This is exactly what you would pay in real life, like right now. This is how much you would pay. Okay? And so to register the home, on your name, or whoever bought the house, like if it's you and your partner, or if 3 people got together to buy a home, like this is what you would pay to transfer the title so that those names show up on the new title. Can I just make an observation here? In this case, we maxed out every bracket completely. We won't always be maxing out. It depends on the price. So try to remember this amount here. You know, like as you go along the brackets, just before you apply the 2%, try to remember the 1650. Because if you remember that, you can know it's like, oh, this house is over 200,000. So I for sure will have to pay the 1650, and then I'll have to pay 2% on whatever is above 200,000. But you know what? If that hurts your brain, just stick with my method, and it works every single time. Okay. So let's do another one. This one went over 200,000. I'm going to do various amounts, and let's see if you can see a pattern here. Follow me to page 62, because this one, there's some tricks here that you need to be aware of. I'm going to just use the same highlighting here, okay? So I did orange, pink, green. So this was pink. The first one was orange, green. So complicated. And yellow. Okay. I think one more time after this, I don't think you need to highlight any more. But here we go. Calculate the land transfer tax of purchasing a home for 135. So this is on page 62. So you start like this. 135 minus 30,000. So you subtract 30,000, we're going to apply 0% to that amount. Times 0, basically. That is just $0. Mental math, we're left with 105. I don't know if you can tell, but we're not going to make it through all the brackets, right? Like we're going to have to stop. So the next bracket is 60 grand. So we're going to go minus 60 because we still can. And that is 0.005. So just divide that percentage by 100 to get this. That is green, right? I will do the calculation later, although some of you might remember. So you subtract here. What are you left with? 45,000. And now, this is where it gets different, guys. Here's where you have to look up. Can I subtract 60 grand from that? No. You are in this bracket, though. This is where you're at. So you're not quite using up the entire bracket. You only have $45,000 in there, in that bracket. So you stop and you just take the 1%, you multiply this by 1%. Because that's the bracket you're in. So that's where this is different, okay? So let's do the multiplication. 60,000 times 0.005. If you recall, it's 300 bucks. And then 45,000 times 1%. This is 450. I'm just going to put down stop. Can't subtract anymore. Okay. So what's your land transfer tax? You're not done yet, right? LTT is 300 plus 450. So in this case, it's very reasonable, right? It's not such an outrageous amount. To be honest, our province needs to revamp this scale. It's very dated. It's been used forever. So back when this was developed, houses probably rarely went past 200,000, right? And now almost every home is past 200,000. So that's something to keep in mind. So now I will stop here because I need you to practice a couple more before we go. So I want you to try example 3 and 4 at first. And then I want you to keep going, but once you checked in and make sure you get everything right. So this is 1,500 that you're supposed to get. This one is 2,150. Okay. So can you calculate the land transfer tax for example 3 and 4? And I will check because it's going to be tomorrow. I'm going to quiz you on that. There's the additional work there.